Our law enforcement friends pulled up to the garage in their patrol vehicle. From beneath the automotive lift, I stealthily observed two uniformed officers exit their cruiser. Their faces seemed unusually joyous for police. However, as they approached, seriousness overtook their features. They verified my identity before delivering dismal updates regarding my spouse at the hospital, though sparse on specifics. Eager to rush to her side, I was stalled by inquiries into my whereabouts the past few hours. "Could you account for your time, sir?" one asked. I explained working at the shop all day, confirming with my mechanics, though admitting slipping out briefly for coffee around 11, visiting a nearby shop. The other spoke with my employees while his partner jotted notes. "May we see your vehicle, sir?" he questioned. "Of course, it's outside." I led him to my prized truck. A thorough inspection ensued. I swiftly examined the car's interior before lifting the hood to feel the icy cold engine. "That will be all, sir," I stated while concealing my concern. The hospital staff relayed Naomi's dire condition and necessary blood transfusion to me, mentioning her surgery had just commenced. A myriad of thoughts flooded my mind as this scenario seemed implausible. Upon exiting, the two officers from earlier intercepted me, probing for additional details through pointed questions over coffee in the cafeteria. Between sips, I recounted our late-life romance, marrying 8 years prior after matching on an online dating site. Naomi had succeeded as a top litigator until children became her calling in her late 30s, pushing past my initial reluctance through compassionate persuasion. Now only prayer and hope could ease my worried mind until the doctor emerged with an update. All I could do was wait and worry over what the next hours may hold. Naomi went home early from her job at the courthouse to rest before our child arrived. A few neighbors stopped by that afternoon, curious why she wasn't at work in the middle of the week. I told them of Naomi's recent resignation to spend some time relaxing and preparing for motherhood before our baby came. In truth, the pregnancy had been taking its toll and she needed time to recuperate her strength. We were both eager to start this new chapter of our lives together as a family. The visitors then asked after a man named Nick Miller, who I did not know. Sensing their line of questioning growing strange, I inquired as to why they asked. However, they evaded answering and took their leave. Confident my employees had secured the property as usual, I headed straight home when finished for the day. Upon arriving, 2 forensic technicians and a detective greeted me at the door, already searching the house. The detective introduced himself and gave a cursory overview of their visit. He went on to repeat the neighbor's queries, plus one more about traces of blood discovered in the downstairs lavatory. I maintained my innocence, at a loss for what had brought them here. Before they could interrogate me further, I demanded to understand the meaning of this unwarranted investigation. Treating this as an accident while also feeling like a suspect, I asked if I could be assured of a broader investigation. "Can you promise me you aren't solely focused on me, but are exploring all angles for the true culprit?" The inspector replied reassuringly, "You have my word, sir, that we have multiple lines of inquiry underway. My colleague is presently speaking with Mrs. Miller." I inquired about this Nick Miller I kept hearing mentioned. Apologizing, the inspector said it inappropriate to comment further. He and the forensic team then excused themselves, leaving me puzzled. I climbed the stairs to the master bedroom and watched the scene unfolding. Seeing it now for the first time, I imagined I would be shocked. Earlier that morning around 10 o'clock at the office, my thoughts drifted toward intimacy. Though not abnormal, some say the average man's mind wanders there 67 times per waking hour. Let me assure you, after nearly a month virtually cut off, husbands with unfulfilled desires can certainly think on it more frequently. Ever since Naomi left her job, things between us had grown distant. Where we once found intimacy 2 or 3 times a week, now I was lucky if she seemed open to even a simple embrace. More often than not, she appeared sullen and withdrawn, complaining of exhaustion or unease. While I suspected this change was due to her uncertainty about embarking on a new chapter, I cared too much for her well-being to press the issue. Instead, I endeavored to offer quiet support, hoping in time she might rediscover her enthusiasm for life and for us. Each day could bring small improvements, and I took comfort knowing that as with any challenge, she would meet this transition at her own pace. I understood that parenthood would change my life profoundly, though its impact on my partner had not fully registered. As our children's earliest days faded into memory, I found myself dwelling on those unburdened years when intimacy was immediate and carefree. We strived then to keep our bond invigorated, allowing whimsy to guide us until routine gradually took hold. A moment's clarity shook me from distraction. I knew the prescription to rekindle that which first drew us together through spontaneity renewed. In an impulse, I decided to leave work unexpectedly and surprise my love with ardor restored. Yet arriving home, an unanticipated sight dampened my aim. An unfamiliar vehicle in our usual spot. Thwarted again by happenstance beyond my control. Still, I chose optimism, hopeful that within our walls, connection could be rekindled. Perhaps my companion could have been convinced to depart and my plans salvaged. I opened the entranceway without concealment or pretense, instantly on edge knowing our marriage had ended. Lustful noises unmistakably echoed downstairs. Instinctually, I retrieved the phone and began videotaping, a habit when clients brought cars for servicing to preclude accusations of scratches. Heart pounding, I ascended and peeked through the bedroom door phone prepared, confirming my wife in the throes with an unfamiliar man on our mattress, straining not to barge in. I looked away, collapsing on the floor, overcome by anguish, resigned that disengaging was the most difficult act of my life. As I stood frozen in place, the agony of their betrayal reverberated through my mind. Though the cacophony of their acts had ceased, overhearing their casual conversation only added further insult to the injury. Momentarily paralyzed, I struggled to process the depth of deceit that had just been revealed. Seeking respite from the incessant torture of their voices, I knew I must remove myself to a location where I could begin to collect my fragmented thoughts. Once distant enough to find some semblance of quiet, perhaps there I could start to sift through the pieces of what was left of my shattered world. I instinctively knew that any reaction I made based on emotion would, at the very least, land him in the hospital and me in prison. I needed time to think. I quietly got up from the floor, tiptoed downstairs and collapsed on the sofa. Away from the sights, smells, and most of the sounds of betrayal, I was free from emotional distractions. I did what I knew best and came up with a plan. Get him out of the room and out of sight, beat the crap out of him where there won't be too many bruises, the stomach should be in perfect order, then throw him out the back door naked. Come back for her and throw her naked out the door. This should give them the right impression and give me complete freedom. Without bruises and witnesses, I hope I can avoid trial. Luckily, I had the perfect shock weapon in my workshop. 2 years ago, I served in the Army Reserve National Guard, where my skills earned me the task of clearing the trucks we took back to base. That's where I found a small device that would now come in handy. Police call them Stun grenades. Slightly larger than a regular grenade, they are basically a small canister with a lever pin ignition mechanism. They were specifically made for hostage rescue and were designed to cause little physical damage so that they could be thrown into a room full of innocent people without any significant harm. However, the explosion is accompanied by a flash with a power of 8 million candles and a shock sound of 170 decibels. The flash alone can stun a person to the extreme for at least 5 seconds. My mind, driven by my newly acquired hatred, quickly formed the rest of the plan. I didn't want to ruin my house, so I couldn't just throw a grenade on the floor. I took out the device and quickly glued a short piece of rope to it, then put a loop on the end of the rope. Having thus prepared, I tiptoed upstairs. As I got closer, I realized that secrecy was no longer necessary. I clearly heard men's moans coming from behind the bedroom door, pausing only to pick up my phone from the floor outside the door where I had dropped it. I glanced around the door frame. It was heard that the second round of cheating was in full swing. My wife satisfied her lover by caressing his manhood below the waist. Having mentally rehearsed the sequence of events I had decided to do, I took a deep breath and took action. One step into the room, loop the end of the rope around the hook on the bottom of the light fixture, leaving the device hanging halfway to the floor, pull out the pin, put it in your pocket, and walk out the door again. Pressing your fingers tightly to your ears and closing your eyes tightly. Even with my precautions, the effect was amazing. I clearly felt the shockwave and the bright reflected light through my eyelids. Following the plan, I jump into the room again, ready for action. This time it was my turn to be surprised. I don't know exactly what I expected to see, but it was nothing like the scene that appeared before me. Mr. Anonymous was lying on his back on the bed, and his manhood below the waist was clearly damaged. Either nature was extremely unkind to him, or something was missing. Naomi lay on her back on the floor, her eyes blank, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Confused, I went back into the hall to think. My thoughts were soon interrupted by 2 unholy screams from the bedroom, followed by various bangs and slamming doors. I began to realize that I was in deep shit. My plan had failed. Once again, I peered around the door frame at the scene of carnage. The guy rolled out of bed and curled up on the floor, holding his groin, screeching like a banshee. Naomi was nowhere to be seen, but apparently she was in the bathroom. We need to remove the evidence. I returned to the room, looked around, and quickly found the detonator mechanism for the device, adding it to the rope. I couldn't find anything else, so I concluded that everything else had been destroyed. I headed to the bathroom very carefully. Naomi was on her knees, vomiting into the toilet. I had no desire to go and help her, I just didn't care anymore. On my way to the door, I noticed something on the floor. I picked up a piece of flesh. It was warm and soft, and resembled the tip of a tongue. On the way to the front door, I went into the toilet on the first floor and flushed it. They wouldn't sew it back on. Crying not to squeal the tires, I rushed down the street, once again glad that we lived so far from the neighboring houses. Halfway to the garage, I dumped my pockets into a roadside trash can. 10 minutes later, I was back in the small garage that I called work. I called Sam and Itten, two dirty, oil-stained guys who I call my employees and friends. They hurried to me, seeing that I was alarmed. Guys, I need you to be my alibi for the last 45 minutes. What do you say? Of course, boss was heard almost simultaneously. Well, before you agree so quickly, I must tell you that what I did is very serious. And once I explain to you what it is, you may not be so quick to answer. I don't know what I'll be charged with, but it could mean jail time. Before explaining this to them, I went into my office and threw on my dirty old overalls. I then walked over to the trash can and grabbed an oily rag, rubbing it into my face and hands. I didn't know when the police would show up here, but I expected them. The guys looked at me a little stunned. I briefly told them about recent events. Itten was the first to break. He tried to hold on for a good 15 seconds and then burst out laughing. This broke the ice for Sam, who soon joined Itten and me in uncontrollable hooting. It was a full 5 minutes before we all regained control, and with handshakes and promises of support, they returned to their oily engine bays. Over the next hour, spontaneous chuckles were heard from various dingy rooms. My wife, Naomi, was about to reap the rewards she deserved for keeping her distance from my lowly friends in the past. I was cleaning up the master bedroom. That evening, I just washed the bathroom floor. I decided to just throw out the bedding and made a mental note to buy a new rug for the bedroom. Torn curtains will also have to be removed. I tried to stay busy, avoiding thoughts. This process was not helped by constant phone calls and knocking on the door. Sure, the media was in feeding frenzy mode. The combination meant he had a story sent from heaven, and he gave his phone one ring and shut it off. After all, I figured he had nothing but time on his hands. I only had that come to mind myself once I shut the door and soon after shut my own phone off. With nothing to do but think, I did do a whole lot of soul searching. Do I regret what I did? Funny, I don't. I never cheated and hated anyone who did. I think my first wife was a little surprised I didn't turn into a woman when she told me she was cheating. What a funny thing to think, too, that I'd have bet my life before my lunch was even made. Well, it sat prepared on a plate. I'd have bet that my wife shared that same passion. Hard to believe I was so very wrong. Not as hard as I was hit by Naomi's motivation, while I was as devoted to her as her to me, and she was the most loving wife when we were in the bedroom, which was quite a bit. Well, that was until lately. I mulled it over for several hours, all three of them, and couldn't come up with a single thing. The only clue I had to go on was how the hair stood up on the back of my neck when Naomi said, "My fifth-grade teacher was always saying she was retiring to have her last days of freedom." I figured she'd work until at least the 7th month of pregnancy. It just struck me as odd to say she wanted one last hooray before having kids. I was jerked out of my thoughts by my personal cell phone ringing. Few people knew this number. Caller ID said it was Naomi's parents. I didn't live in the same state, but was still about 3 hours away. I never had to try to get along with her parents. We always got on fantastically. So I answered. After considerably less than the usual pleasantries, her mom got down to it. "James, what's going on? Do you know why a bunch of bloodhounds, journalists are besieging our house? Well, they're gonna have to find out someday." I just couldn't work up the ability to go into details. Mom, did you see the news tonight? The local news? Maybe the main news? What? About what? Some cheatin' heifer bit off her lover's dignity or some such. I always did love her mom's colorful language, and the fact that she, like me, didn't have much use for how she became famous is precious. Oh, wait. But geez, it wasn't exactly encouraging. Yes, Mom. Look, there's no good way to put this. Why don't I just start from the beginning? She's a woman. Great timing, because another scream came through my phone followed by a beep. I realized my phone was on the call waiting screen when I tried to end the call. A warning popped up on the screen as I did. I had just received the end of my marriage less than 8 hours earlier. I had foggy memories of leaving my phone recording as I left it on the floor outside my bedroom door when I left. I knew I would never trust another woman again if I didn't find out why Naomi did what she did. There was a chance I would die a lonely misogynist, stuck in a cycle of my own misery. With desperate hope, I touched play. I already knew what I was going to watch. The pain of it was too fresh. I finally forced my eyes open as I set the phone on the floor. The visual began. "Look at that," Benjamin exclaimed in harm contrast to the excellent view. In fairness, it was only a representation, just view of the hall ceiling. Mr. and Mrs. Adultery lie side by side on the bed. I couldn't actually hear the sound, so I ran the file through an amplifier on my computer. This is an important part of their conversation. Wow, Naomi, it was fantastic. Last week has been great, actually. Does this really have to end today? My offer still stands. Just give me your word and I will divorce Sarah and marry you. Well, yes, it looks like it will work. A great start to a marriage with a guy who left his wife and kids. No, and I love James too much to hurt him like that. Plus, he's a great husband and he'll be a great dad. I'll be Mrs. Goody-Goody after today, lol. Housewife, at least until the kids have all joined. You can love him that much. It's not him lying here next to you. No, you're mistaken. I love him very much. The moment I met him, I knew he was my only. A good man who treats me like a queen and will rub my feet once I have big belly from one, if not 2 or 3 of his babies. No, I never wanted anything except to die in your arms, surrounded by our grandchildren. Well, that was a good speech. There's just one problem. Why are you with me now? At least she had the humanity to think about it. There was silence for easily half a minute. I guess I just missed the past. I had my fun. I was 31 and just got married. I was a little wild. I missed just walking into a bar and getting looks from everyone without trying. Sizing up a guy a little, then deciding in a split second if he can have at least what he wants. Lately, James has been gone beer hunting 3 out of 4 weekends with some of the boys. 3 weeks ago, I got to feeling nostalgic and checked out the singles bar scene. One night was fun, but a real letdown is that you finally just think, why bother? Then last Saturday, the bar you happened to walk into for the first time in a very long time. What are you doing? God, you're cold, Naomi. Look at it as your last fling. So what are you griping about? Here, come here. I didn't say that it had to end today. I turned the sound off. Oh well, at least I knew that I was a good man and a good husband. It wasn't me. The next few days passed in full disappointment. 2 days later, the reporters descended and left my street quiet. I received a call from the hospital administrator stating Naomi wanted some pajamas. Missed that one. She's stuck with those humiliating hospital gowns. 2 days later, her father called me. He apologized for her behavior and told me to hold on to his number. Maybe I'd like to go out with him to try to seal the deal. He told me he had another daughter. She had recently been divorced. Sorry, Dad. It's just too weird. 4 days later, he was on the news again. Mr. Not-So-Big Dick was released from the hospital. Reporters dug up something on him. They exposed him as a serial cheater. It was with a sadistic sense of pleasure that they kept saying at the close that while they had success in reattaching his manhood, unfortunately, it was very unlikely that they had achieved any success in its intended functioning. At the close of that week, I had an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Miller, or Emma to most. Emma Miller, as she insisted I call her, was a pretty lady with sad eyes. She told me that she had heard rumors that I might have some evidence that could help her in her divorce case. I explained that maybe it was true, but I couldn't admit it without exposing myself. She understood everything and was very apologetic for asking. I told her that I thought there was such an abundance of circumstantial evidence that she wouldn't need what I had. If this turns out to be wrong, I will persuade her to return and perhaps change her mind. There was such sadness in her that I felt sorry for her. Pulling out the video file, I played her only in the aftermath of the big explosion. The shock of her husband's screams made her cower at first, but she soon pulled herself together. Suffice it to say that she was not very sad when she left. Being the helpful guy that I am, I invited her to come pick me up when the sadness returned. Oh yeah, that wasn't the last time I saw Emma Miller. The last visitor I received was probably the strangest. On Saturday, I came to my senses and gave the detective an answer at the door. I had spoken to him at the house the day of the big game. The suit was gone, replaced with jeans and a shirt. Hey, kid, no, I won't come in. I just wanted to let you know, not enough evidence. I made the recommendation that the case be closed. After a thank you, he turned to leave, but then turned back. Look, the year I retire, at the end I retire. If I come back in here after that, will you tell me how you did it? With a smile, I wished him a good day. Naomi's letter came the following Tuesday. My dear James, I can't express how ashamed and sorry I am that I did this to you. I understand why I couldn't see me, and I forgive you unconditionally. I never considered the far-reaching effects that this might have occurred. I didn't, for example, really think they would let their youngest daughter go to prison for so long. You probably never want to hear from me again. You probably never want to see my silly face again, and I'll completely understand if you want to disown me. Naomi, I know I've lost your love, your trust, and your respect forever. I miss you more than you can ever imagine, so you'll likely never want to talk to me again. But if you choose to read this, I think it may help your recovery to know, first and foremost, all my fault. I won't be able to speak again for some time or maybe forever. Doctors aren't completely sure. When I bit off my tongue, I think I swallowed the tip, they tell me. They try to explain some kind of experimental twisting stretching, but I think it's mostly so I can possibly have some kind of career again, to break up the monotony of the remaining loveless, childless future stretching ahead of me. Ask for anything in the divorce and I will sign it. If you ever find it in your extraordinary heart to give me one more chance and stay married to me, I'll be eternally grateful. If you could keep me on your health insurance for a little while, I really would be surprised, but eternally grateful. Goodbye, my love, my darling. I wish you nothing but the best and all the happiness in the world. Hugs, your Naomi Well, your cheating wife. I have to say, I was really touched by it, so I changed my mind. I just sent the pajamas to the hospital. Now can I have Mick and Sam's number, and do I owe them a beer, a keg per? Subscribe so your second cheat and wife doesn't cheat, and go ahead and see the next story. This story's nothing, just see the next one. If you're under 18, don't even listen to it. Just cut it off now because it's very clear. Just see the next one. See the next one. Go ahead and see the next one.